formal mission of U equals me is stated as a movement of conscientious objectors to intolerance, or simply stated, a movement against intolerance. And the exploration of that statement really gets to what are the similarities between people? What do we all have in common? Why are we really equal as humankind? And that's what we're going to explore.
This podcast is about exploring conversational thoughts and interviews with extraordinary people living ordinary lives of well-being. Discussions on exactly what well-being means to people day to day, factors that can influence it both internally and externally. We glean insights on how to survive and thrive in feeling satisfied in life with a greater sense of purpose. Guest hosts bring fresh new outlooks and opinions from spirituality, science, worldviews, and standing up and speaking out for what's right.
It's pretty interesting. Man needs each other and planet Earth to survive. Check it out. I think you'll like what you hear.
Here we go. We are so happy you are here today with our U equals me podcast. Friends and family from around the world, we want you to know that we are grateful for this community. My name is Cindy Jarvis, your co-host today with our dear friend Lynn Brewer. Lynn is the biggest support for illuminating the pathways of the U equals me Foundation. She immediately recognized the majesty in the project, and she is dedicated in moving this movement forward with us, and we are grateful. Welcome, Lynn.
Good to be here, Cindy.
Thanks for being here. So, before we start, Lynn, I thought maybe today we could just take a few moments of silence for our Ukrainian neighbors. And just a few minutes if our friends from around the world would like to join us. I'd like to say to Ukraine, may the love of God surround you. May the love of God assist you. And may the love of God be known by you. Great, thank you. Okay, so the U equals me movement, that's what we call it. We're calling our motivations here. We're a movement, and we are an inclusive, connected community, bridging all races, religions, cultures, and genders, and abilities globally through education, conversations, and real-life stories. Our basic function of the foundation is paving pathways to peace by learning the inception of intolerance. You're going to hear my papers here. I've got my notes. Lynn and I are sitting here on this beautiful, fun day. It's great to be in person again. I'm so excited. We thought it would be really fun to share some of our conversations with you, because when Lynn and I get on the phone, or when we get together, but especially on the phone, the conversation can last for over an hour, and we have to hang up because we have to get back to work. But we thought today, we'd like to talk about mental health. And although we're not psychotherapists or psychologists, we have acquired some wisdom along the way. So I always like to get right to the cause and not to the effects of things. And Lynn and I have been talking about mental health for quite a while, and mental health is directly related to our every thought in our every moment and in every day. And all the things that we've been told about ourselves from teachers, parents, society are questionable. Belittled, bewildered, not enough, too much, don't be conceited, unworthy of love, and deserving of punishment. Lynn, thanks for sharing your thoughts on this, because you and I have talked about it extensively, about mental health and what constitutes mental health.
Yeah, of course, we've talked about the sort of what brings about maybe whether you have a genetic disposition for mental health issues, or whether you have some traumatic event come on in your life that causes you to then become mentally ill. And a lot of times we see people, maybe they are on the street talking to themselves, and you never know what brought them to that place. And it could be, hundreds of diagnoses that has got them in a situation where they're processing information mentally. And of course, my story, I grew up as a competitive figure skater, and I didn't realize until quite later in life that what we do oftentimes when we're in a place of trauma is we'll create drama in our lives, or the drama will feed the adrenaline. Mm-hmm. And we have receptors in our brains and in our bodies that feed off this adrenaline. And eventually it's truly like a drug where if you're not getting it, you look for ways to get it. And that's a cycle that really, in some cases, and certainly in mine, when I had a traumatic event, I had to go on a dopamine and to stop sort of these repeating thoughts that almost function like epilepsy, where the brain just cycles over and over and over again. Mm-hmm. And I do know that if I'm in somewhere where there's strobe lights or blinking lights, it will cause a sort of chain reaction where I'm sort of like, okay, I need to get out of here. So that brain, the chemistry in the brain is really, really interesting.
It is.
And balancing all that. So when I was growing up as a competitive figure skater at 6, I didn't realize that my body at a very young age was pumping this adrenaline into my system. And as I got older, then I got into real, as trading commodities and something that would create that same adrenaline. And it wasn't until something traumatic happened to me, and I had no idea that I was maybe suffering at least from a traumatic episode that triggered what I would call mental health versus mental illness to be disrupted. And so I, about 30 years ago, actually, I had a very traumatic event involving a sexual assault by someone I knew and was in a relationship with. And I immediately collapsed sort of in the bathroom and felt almost like there was this 52 card pickup of my chakras. I guess I describe it as my chakras, the energy centers. I don't think I knew what it was at the time. And as time went on, it just got worse and worse and worse. And so I called a girlfriend in North Carolina and said, Darlene, I think I'm going to commit suicide. And she's like, oh my God, you've got to call the suicide hotline. So I called the suicide hotline and they put me on hold. So of course, today I can laugh about it.
Yeah.
But at the time I called her back and I'm like, Darlene, they put me on hold. She's like, no, they did not. And I said, yes, I got put on hold by the suicide hotline, right? So it was that point in time, or from that point in time, where suddenly I felt myself almost at the bottom of an ocean, where I couldn't get up above the water, where I just said, I need to get some help. I need to get some help. And so that was a process in and of itself, because your world's bad, but then when you're looking at other people and counseling, group counseling, I did check myself into a clinic in a clinic. I had no idea where to go with this, but I was like, okay, Betty Ford has a clinic. Yeah. I'll go.
Yeah, but you don't even drink.
I don't drink and I don't do drugs. And then so I'm trying to, and of course the Betty Ford clinic rejected me because I didn't drink and I didn't do drugs. So I did find a place, and within about 3 days, I realized that I had a traumatic event, but I wasn't as bad off as I thought I was. So that looking others in their places of trauma and hearing about their situation, I suddenly realized I don't think I'm as bad off as I think I am, or at least I can get back to a mentally healthy state. And that's when they said, okay, you need to be on Prozac, very small levels, and then this anti-seizure medicine. And so, it's been a long process, and there are times where I can tell the difference between being depressed and being sad. And I can say to my husband, I'm feeling depressed. And to him, that's sadness. Like, he just doesn't understand it. But I can I can tell you, and I will go see the doctor and I'll say, okay, I need to get back on something. Because you get in this cycle, this downward cycle.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I want to talk about. Mm-hmm. And then thanks for sharing that with us. Sean, we have a good friend, Lynn and I have a good friend who wants to talk about how he dug himself out of his mental health. And it's just like you said, it started with losing a business, getting a divorce, some event that spiraled downward.
Yeah.
And so I'm really excited to hear, and I love to hear how you pulled yourself out, and we're going to hear more about that in just a second. But what I wanted to say was that thinking, our thoughts are so powerful. And this is really what we want people to know. It's to understand their own personal power behind their thoughts, because each thought that you have is a purchase order.
Right.
It's like something you put in your shopping cart, because that's in the very next moment, that's what's coming.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that it's so easy to have these negative or loveless thoughts. And I think it's really important that we catch ourselves. And it's a practice to catch yourself at it when you have an unloving or a negative thought. Because if you can catch yourself, you can stop in that very moment and change it.
Yeah, it's interesting because you and I have talked about this. I, for a long time, sort of referred to myself as Miss Mean Tweets, because I would see somebody say something really stupid, or I just was like, well, I have this motto, stupid people don't know they're stupid. But the reality is that it was an outlet for me. It was a release for me, like a pressure cooker where whatever was going on in my life, I could just go in and I don't mean viciously attack somebody, but when you call somebody stupid, it's just not a kind thing to do. Well, I really got to a place where, number one, I realized that it was a chemical release for me in the brain when I could tweet out something. Again, Miss Mean Tweets. I mean, I wouldn't consider myself a mean person.
No.
But it was an anonymous. That's the problem with social media in general, is it's anonymous, and you can attack
be a little
people,
meaner, maybe.
Right? Yeah, you can be mean. And the reality is, I got to the point where I was like, this is not serving me. It's not serving me at all. And so I took a step back and said, okay, so now before I hit the tweet button, or send button, I really am in that place where I can stop and say, this is not the person that I want to be, and it is not serving me.
Right.
So
I think that also in working on our own mental health, let's just be real here. We've had 4 years of divisive politics. We've had 2 years of pandemic and now war.
Yeah.
I think everybody's nerves are completely fried. I do think that it's important for us to let go of the old paradigm of not being good enough or not being worthy to have a great life, because we're all worthy of everything that we want.
Well, and also it's to not create a situation where you have to inject yourself in a situation where you're stating that you're superior, right? Because that's really a counterintuitive thing to really that you're insecure or that you don't feel as though you add up. And so I think that's the other half of this thing, is that the divisive nature of the politics is a lot on misinformation, where one side or the other is saying, we're superior because we're doing X, Y, or Z. So if we take sort of in the moment by moment by moment and reflect not only what we're feeling internally, because our gut is our GPS, right? Mm-hmm. But also when we want to cut somebody off in traffic, when we want to sort of mean tweet out, it feeds that negative stuff within our own lives that isn't working. It's just a mechanism to release, but we don't look at the people as people. They're just expressing our frustration or whatever it might be. And we have to get to that's why I love the mission of U equals me on intolerance, because we never know. We never know when we see somebody on the train or we see somebody in traffic. I mean, maybe their wife has just died or whatever, right, and they cut us off. And of course, we immediately feel wronged and we want to get back at them, and, rage sets in. So it is a moment by moment process to say, I want to be present just in the moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it's really important to realize that there are really two emotions, and one is love and the other one's fear. So fear is all the negative emotions, the hatred, all the unloving thoughts that you have. And the emotions of love are the good feeling thoughts that bring you peace. And it's easy to suffer in fear.
Yeah. And the other thing is I think you have to first identify that it is fear.
Right.
And then the next thing is realize fear is a choice.
Right.
Fear is a choice.
Yeah.
I choose to be afraid. And the key is when you're having a reaction, whether it's rage, anger, sadness, joy, whatever it may be, where it's a fear-based moment, you just have to, in that moment, say, this is not who I am. This is simply an event or a circumstance or my personality coming out.
Yeah, you have to be able to catch those thoughts. And that's what I'm saying. It takes practice. And in that moment where you're like, oh, that's a negative thought, let me choose something else. And if that's too hard, ooh, that's a negative thought. Let me look at 3 things I'm grateful for. Oh, I'm grateful for the color of that tree, and smell it and taste it and hear it. And that brings you back into the present moment to start a new track. What I think is interesting is that a lot of us think, in a straight line. A lot of us, we're just going in a straight line, and it really doesn't work that way because it's a circle. Humanity is a circle. Thoughts are a circle.
Interconnected too.
Interconnected. So thoughts are not linear. Mm-hmm. So whatever you're thinking today is going to manifest for you tomorrow. So choose a better feeling thought.
Yes, absolutely.
Because it does manifest. It's powerful like that.
Mm-hmm. Thoughts become things, don't they?
Thoughts become things, yeah.
And I just watched the series, the Oprah series on Apple TV, The Me You Don't Know. I think that's what it's called.
I saw
and it's
that.
all, in most cases, famous people, NBA players, a boxer, female boxer. Of course, Prince Harry is in it.
Yes.
And you begin to see as these people go through their lives, one had obsessive compulsive disorder, and you begin to see that it's universal. Mental health and mental illness is universal. And they get stuck in that trap. I just saw something on TikTok, actually, talking about the chemicals in the brain. And I sort of want to talk about this because it's those chemicals that start misfiring, where it's like a short in the light, right? We're not getting the light.
Yeah.
And so the first chemical that our brain releases, and I did a lot of research on this when it happened to me to sort of understand what was happening and what was off. So there's dopamine, which is the reward chemical. So whatever it might be, we look for avoidance of pain or pleasure. And
right.
That pleasure center is what provides the dopamine. What a lot of people don't understand is we have these reactions oftentimes, and and get enraged or whatever it might be because of the cortisol, which then slows down and makes us feel better. And it's that which we become addicted to. But one of the things they talked about is there are things that we can do to provide, to get into that dopamine chemical within our brain. And one of those is to complete a task, do a self-care activity, whether that's taking a walk, interacting with your animals, your spouse, whatever it might be, where you can sort of tap into that, ooh, that makes me feel good. The next one is writing a gratitude list. Mm-hmm. I often think, man, today is the day I should get up and write 10 things that I'm thankful for. Mm-hmm. And I mean, you don't have to look at very far, but just Ukraine, right? Every emotion that you can possibly have, including my anger towards Putin and my love for the Ukrainian people that I've never met and my empathy and all of that, and just be grateful in the moment for what you do have. The other one was celebrating little wins, right? If you have something on your to-do list and you finish it, it's a win.
Oh yeah, it feels good.
Yeah, it does. It does. And then the easiest one is listening to music. Yeah. Where it just calms you. It's, and music is one of those things where I can put on a song from the 70s or 80s and all of a sudden I remember exactly where I was the first time I heard it.
Yeah.
It takes me back there, so it's great. Yeah. So that's one of the things that I think we're in a situation where there are things that we can do in that self-love.
Yes, absolutely. I love the gratitude because that does pave a new neural pathway. Thoughts attract thoughts, more thoughts. So you can easily create a vortex either way of positivity or negativity. And I'm not talking about just saying positive things and not believing them.
Right.
Because part of the power of the word is the thought and the feelings behind it. Mm-hmm. And you know what I thought was really interesting? I saw this, I think sometimes I look up the strangest words, like everyday words like realization.
Oh, yeah.
Like, what does that really mean? I know you do that too.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And the word realization is an old Sanskrit word that means from thought to things.
Oh.
Isn't that interesting?
Absolutely.
And it's leading from the unseen to the seen.
Okay.
That's the definition of realization.
Yeah.
Who knew?
Yeah.
It's incredible.
Interesting.
So, yeah, it is interesting because it's like perception. And our bodies respond to our word because our bodies are listening to us, Mm-hmm. And disease is coming from our mental dis-ease.
Right.
That's where it's coming from.
Right.
So the word actually means taking flesh, I mean,
yes.
the word
taking flesh as in becoming manifest in
exactly,
in our reality.
Exactly. The law says, whatsoever man thinketh, so shall he reap.
Yeah.
I mean, that kind of floored me. That's very real. And I think the source of most of our upsets and recriminations over the past, guilt and shame, worries about the future, I think all of that is reliving these events over and over again. And I feel like we need to tell a different story with a new thought.
Yeah, it's really hard because within the chemicals of the brain, and again, these receptors, it really does sort of take you down a path where you feel like I don't necessarily have that control. That's why these things like, the next chemical is the mood stabilizer serotonin.
Right.
So Prozac, for instance, is a serotonin reuptake. So it gets the serotonin moving in a healthier way within the brain, the chemistry of the brain. And in that case, again, stabilizing your mood is meditating, running, being exposed to vitamin D that comes from the sun.
Right. Or taking it if you live in the Northwest.
Yep. Taking a walk in nature, deep breathing, cycling, all these things that can be done that sort of put us in a situation where we're able to, in the moment, just say, okay, this is bothering me. And I often refer to, there's this great thing of yesterday is the past, tomorrow is the future, today is the present, or now is the present. That's why they call it a gift, right?
Right.
So, yeah, I do think it's, again, now there are going to be people in life that we come across, and I'm writing a book right now on a murder for hire where and I read a great book is sort of studying the character where called the psychopath or the sociopath next door, where people just don't have conscience. They just don't have a conscience.
Yeah.
And that's the extreme of mental illness. Mm-hmm. They're born without a conscience. So they literally can, Ted Bundy, kill people and feel nothing, but they're getting a high in the moment. They can run over animals. The things that you and I would look at and go, oh my gosh, that's so horrible. And I guess one in 100 of us don't have a conscience. And if we don't have a conscience, this is a whole different game, so to speak, of understanding, because if you just don't see it, that's a whole different thing, but that's very rare.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So
that's Putin.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
that is Putin.
That's Putin. I think that this is a great conversation. I love having conversations like this with you because it's powerful to realize that we can take control. We can create what we want to create. And you and I have been talking recently because you've been manifesting. You've got this great project going on that you've started a while ago. And you just said, okay, I'm going to throw it out there and I'm just going to let it go and not have any tendrils or ribbons tied to it. I'm just going to put it out there. And doors have been opening just right and left by stating your intention.
Yeah, it is. It's interesting because that takes practice, right? Mm-hmm. So, at some point, one of the things too that mental illness happens, or the disruption of mental health happens when we try to control outcomes.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that has come with wisdom along the way, right?
Yeah.
It's through the experiences to say, I have not any control over this. Now I know where I want to go. I put the GPS coordinates in there, and then I let the universe just take it.
Yeah.
And 100% of the time, I am absolutely amazed. And the expression of love that the universe has for me, it doesn't want to harm me.
Right. It doesn't. But it's so cool to witness that for me, because I know you. But to let it go just means really you're allowing it. That's what I love about it.
Yeah, it is. It's not easy because I have this type A personality, but I'm also at that point in my life where it's probably my last gig, so to speak, my sunset career. And I have had an amazing life. I grew up as a figure skater, and an intense, trained by an Olympic coach. I raced jet skis. I have won enormous amount of awards. I blew the whistle on the 5th largest corporation, which pivoted into a speaking career that took me all over the world. Mm-hmm. And while I've had bad things happen to me, I realized that there's this thing, if you hold a grudge against somebody, they don't even know it. And you're holding on to it, just like you're dragging suitcases full of this baggage around.
Right. It's more hurtful to you than it is the one that you're judging.
Yeah.
I think that's very true.
Absolutely.
It sets you back.
Yeah, it does. And it keeps you tied to the past rather than opening up to see what the future has before us. Sean did some amazing things with great intention, and then suddenly, bad people came along and took advantage of him. And I've had that happen. And, and that pivots into a cycle of other things falling apart in the process.
Sean is our friend that we're going to be interviewing here in the near future. He's also a filmmaker. So he's the one that's going to share his little journey of mental health and how he recovered. So I'm looking forward to that. I'm also looking forward to some of the podcasts that you're working on.
Yeah. So I'm working on one now about, and it really started after I blew the whistle. I was part of a documentary, the subject of a documentary at the Nobel Peace Center, which is now a permanent exhibit at the Nobel Peace Museum on how free is free. And one of the things that comes with our current nature of society is people want to censor people. They want their voice to be heard, but they don't want anybody else to speak freely. And so I'm looking forward to doing the podcast about, this series called The Voice, so that, I can express my voice, but also have other people have the opportunity to participate in that. Yeah.
Yeah. Just to hear the other side of the story, whether you agree with it or not.
Well, that's what U equals me is about, right?
That's what it's all about.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, this has been awesome, Lynn. I love chatting with you.
Thank you,
Cindy. Look forward to more podcasts with you.
Yeah.
And The Voice coming up.
Yes, absolutely.
Very cool.
Yep.
Alrighty. Thanks for listening. Choose love. Be brave. Bye for now. Thank you for listening today. Lynn is so much fun to talk to, and there's nothing shameful about mental health issues. We have to first recognize our negative emotions in order to move ahead to healthier minds. We look forward to her podcast, The Voice, which is featured on the U Equals Me podcast. Be sure and subscribe for alerts on new downloads. To purchase our One Worlders Ukrainian t-shirt, go to U Equals Me Etsy store, all one word in your Google search. 100% of the profits go to support Ukrainian World Food Program. Links in the show notes. You can join our One Worlders group for a complimentary copy of our ebook, Wisdom Along the Way. And of course, you can reach me or Lynn at info@uequalsme.org. Go in love, bring in light. We need it.